Hello, I'm Karina Vandenover, partner at Elixir. Welcome to this fireside chat with Sri Rajagopalan, a e-commerce and direct-to-consumer veteran. In this conversation, we'll be demystifying direct-to-consumer for CPG brands. Thank you for joining us, Sri. What are some examples of ways in which DTC brands can build those relationships with consumers? So kind of some concrete examples of that engagement building.
To me, that comes down to user experience. Without user experience, there's no engagement in the first place.
Absolutely.
So let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
If you're going to get into D2C, you don't have to scale and go day one into a commerce cloud, big commerce. You could start with a Shopify.
Yeah.
But even on Shopify, you have to pay attention to user experience. So that's like right front, heart, right in the square, whatever that word is, right in the center of it all. You got to pay attention to user experience. Once you do that, what I mean by building a relationship with a consumer is having the desire to measure lifetime loyalty, and it's constant communication. That's what the surround sound effect is. That's email. That's welcoming you on the website when you arrive with an aura of personalization. That personalization is not you're getting a custom web page that looks something specific for you. Look at the simple thing Amazon does. When you click on a product, it says others have also browsed blah, others have also purchased blah. So that's the AI engine we talked about in another question. Very simple, use AI to do, but it gives a feeling of personalization. Welcome the person with their name, because odds are you've stored a cookie and you know what their name is. Welcome them. For example, welcome Karina, and then always have a chat bot so they can ask. And I use chatbot as a simple example. Whatever mechanism you have for them to ask questions on the spot, get answers on the spot. Have an excellent FAQ section. You have to be able to predict what are like these 30 things every customer is going to ask. And most customers prefer to go to an FAQ versus go to the chatbot or to chat with somebody. Your FAQ section has to be absolute world class. You have to be 100% transparent with your shipping policy and price of shipping. You have to be 100% transparent with your returns policy. And in today's world of D2C retail, you absolutely have to have customer service for returns. If somebody wants to return a product or they don't like it, you have to have the ability to do it seamlessly with a few clicks on the website. And then I want to add UGC into the mix. If you fail to follow up with a consumer to ask for a ratings and review, what you can't do is influence the quality of the ratings and review. Every customer is allowed to write what they truly feel about the brand, and you have to embrace it. And every review matters. You have to follow up, chase it, get it, embrace it, bring it on, learn, fix. I see it as a 360. And then as you build lifetime value, if you have a love for analytics, which is the number one requirement again on D2C, you're going to understand this consumer's lifetime journey for me is going to be worth $1,762.19. Obviously, I made up that number for illustration. They are 842 of the way in. So I've got half of my journey still with them. How do I make sure I don't lose them to another brand? Is it value based on pricing? Is it value based on a sampling program I'm bringing them to try my new innovation? Could I add them to a focus group and make them feel like they can participate in shaping new products that come from me? Is there a special basket I can curate or help them curate based on the existing product? None of this stuff is huge investment of labor or costs or expenses or investments. It's just an investment of strategic thinking. To me, that's the surround sound.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. One of the points you made earlier was this profitability question, right? So let's talk a little bit about the economics of D2C, kind of on face value, right? Direct consumer brands in an e-commerce world, no stores, no shared margins with retailers or distributors, no listing fees, no massive trade reps that you need to fund. So what then is the key rationale for the struggle in profitability? Is it simply a question of scale?
Yeah, it's actually an easy one to answer, Karina. Let's again keep our conversation to scaled brands. We won't go into the world of digital natives because that's a whole different ballgame. They don't have distribution, right? For scale brands, the consumer is trained to look for them in store or look for them at Amazon. This is easy. Or at a Walmart.com, perhaps, like an omni-channel
Yeah.
ecosystem. So when you create your D2C website, you have to create awareness that that D2C website exists, aka your brand website.
Yeah.
To do that, you're going to have to invest in a advertising/marketing plan where you're going to find that the consumer acquisition cost, depending on the price point of your product,
Yeah.
is going to actually exceed the gross revenue from one unit of that product. And generally, if your product is in the less than $20 range per unit, you are going to, in the beginning, from a consumer acquisition cost and return on ad spend, you're going to spend more than you get back.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in the $75 range, like I was dealing with Elizabeth Arden, you've already reached a point where your consumer acquisition cost from day one is going to be much lower. So, but most fast moving consumer goods are in the less than $20 per unit price point.
Yeah.
So what happens is a very good marketer knows that that's a 3, 6, 9 month journey where you're going to have the negative return on ad spend and the consumer acquisition spend, and then you build as you get more and more traffic. But if you're used to marketing at the top of the funnel and not at the bottom of the funnel, you're really sending people to the store and you're getting a ton of conversions, and you're going to have the temptation to measure apples to oranges and say, oh my God, even though I'm spending only $100,000 here, but 7 million here, I'm going to say this 100,000 is so unprofitable. Look at my 7 million. You're going to say, this doesn't work for me. And I feel it's just training and experience over time. The best marketers will gravitate from here to embracing understanding here. And it's really all about traffic driving over time at the end of the day. That's the easy answer to this question. And fulfillment costs, like you said, listing fees, you don't need reps, they all get offset on the fulfillment side.
Yeah.
So another area where DTC brands struggle with, let's say, cost versus investment is the cost of fulfillment. That is the common carrier charge, FedEx, UPS, USPS, etc. The way to get around that is if you do your own D2C, you're never going to be fulfilling as many transactions as a third-party provider in the business of fulfillment who's going to work with hundreds of brands and has amazing negotiated rates with all these common carriers. So I always encourage large brands, day one, please look into using a third-party partner. If your supply chain muscle can learn from them and you can negotiate good shipping rates, then you try to in-house it over the course of time. But in-housing fulfillment should not be a business goal on day one, because your supply chain operations isn't ready for it, because it's built to deliver product in case packs at scale to a retail warehouse. So why break that ecosystem immediately? Build it with a lens of long-term and sustainable profitability.
And what are your thoughts about these kind of alternative last mile delivery businesses, right? So instead of obviously using the usual 3PL big partners, is kind of what are your thoughts on them? So like the Deliveroo, the Ubers, the Uber Eats, and etc.
Let's use those two examples, right? The three that come to mind are Deliveroo, obviously Europe, and Uber Eats is now starting to make its way into Europe, as pretty much the whole world actually, other than countries where Uber doesn't operate. And then you have Instacart and Uber Eats here in the United States, right? To me, that business model of fulfillment to an expert who's fulfilling many things in a day, economically is always going to be a better investment than trying to build this muscle power yourself, almost like a no-brainer. Plus, when the consumer is shopping with an Instacart or with a Deliveroo, they're choosing from hundreds and thousands of SKUs across multiple categories. You become a part of a basket. And I think both you and I know very well, Karina, the business of FMCG is, and will be the business of baskets. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, you'll have very sustainable growth models profitably. The business of D2C is a each's business.
Yeah.
If you can get it into a basket business, voila.
Yeah. So this actually, so this was a question I forgot to ask earlier around the choice between monobrand sites, right? For those that have a portfolio of products versus a multi-product site. So like an Oreo.com versus a Clo19, which is Moet Hennessy's e-commerce platform for all their brands.
Sure.
What are the kind of pros and cons of each one?
let's dig into why brands don't, even in the largest companies that work across many brands, you rarely see a cross portfolio sell.
Yeah.
Rarely. And there's a good reason why. It has to do with the buying structure on the retail side.
Mm-hmm.
So because the various parts of the portfolio are placed in different places in the store, you're often going to find, if you're a cross portfolio company, you may have 5 or 6 different buyers whose motivations to buy from you are based on the category they support. So they don't connect together other than for strategic top to tops as one brand or one set of brands portfolio from a negotiation purpose.
Yeah.
And really, they're operating individually in the categories that they merchandise in store. Nothing wrong with it. That's the business model. That's the way
Yeah.
it's going to be. But when you come to your website, if you are a cross portfolio brand, you're entering the business of DTC. Earlier, Karina, we've talked about leveraging baskets and the way to move from unprofitable to profitable, just like in the CPG business model. Even if you're selling units, which is what you do to the shopper in store, you're relying on a basket to manage profitability for the retailer. Why should it be different for a brand cross portfolio? Like, it's a no-brainer. If you enter D2C, from day one, you got to think, when can I reach baskets for this to be profitable? Even if it's a small business and you do it for the purpose of collecting data, for the purpose of A/B testing innovation, faster you can get to baskets, your consumer acquisition cost is going to drop because you're doing a trade up with relatively little additional advertising costs, which I think is a big deal.
Yeah.
So I urge brands that are in the portfolio business model, if you get into D2C, think baskets and cross portfolio on day one. What holds brands back, on the contrary, why they don't get into it on the day one, is because they've catered their entire marketing ecosystems
Yeah.
based on brand P&Ls. Again, nothing wrong with it. That's the business model, because the buyer on the other side of the store, that's what they want. So obviously your responsibility as a brand to the buyer is to deliver what they're asking for, which is how the consumer has shopped previously. And because of that, there's this fear that if I bring it together in one portfolio in a basket, will I erode some brand equity for certain brands? How will the consumer perceive me? The cohort is not the same, because one brand's cohort is not going to overlap directly with another brand's segmentation model. And so you have to create this new segmentation model for cross portfolio. But a cross portfolio D2C approach offers your best ecosystem, whether it's in-store, pure play, or D2C, to actually do trade ups and build recurring revenue and measure LTV. Ones who do that, more power to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Just conscious of time, because I know that you actually have a hard stop. So one final question. I hope that's all right to do one final question.
Absolutely.
Which is around, you already alluded to it earlier, in terms of this ways of working and how you measure profitability, etc. What are your top 3 pieces of advice in terms of ways of working that needs to shift within these large CPG companies in terms of managing a D2C business side by side with their traditional business?
Yes. So here's a very untraditional one. You're going to have to know technology. You have to understand user experience. You have to understand ABCs of you don't have to be a developer, but you got to understand ABCs of how APIs work. That word API, I come from a commercial world. Prior to really touching IT in some capacity at PepsiCo, I didn't even know what that means. Yeah. So you have to understand how to connect Shopify's example to Klaviyo for email marketing. That's an API. So you have to know technology, number one, at the surface level. Yeah. And then rely that very number one results in number 2, which is you have to have a cross-functional intellectual curiosity. You can't be a person in D2C that says, I'm responsible for marketing, you're responsible for supply chain, you're responsible for customer service, you're responsible for technology. You have to be able to, you can be an expert at something, but you got to be able to pinch hit across the board. And the reverse is true, by the way. If you're the technologist on the team that's responsible for the API, the integration, the website, hosting, security, you got to understand why we do this D2C in the first place. And that when an urgent call comes for you to fix something on the website, here's the reason why. You shouldn't have to ask, Oh, can I have 72 hours? Can I put it through some process? Because the consumer ain't gonna wait for you. Same thing on the supply chain side. You're gonna have to understand the commercial metrics. So that's number two. You gotta be an expert at something or a handful of things, and you gotta be able to pinch it across the board. And the third thing I'll repeat again and again is, again, do not enter the D2C business model if you don't have a love for numbers and analytics. Every single day, the first thing you do when you get up is you look at everything from sessions. You start, just think of a funnel, pretty straightforward. Consumers arrive on my website. That's the top of the funnel. How did they get there? Was it advertising? Was it organic? Once they got there, what did they click on as they move through the funnel? Then you get to the bottom of the funnel. They put it in the cart. Yippee. Did they go through the checkout process? Double yippee. Oh my gosh, they didn't buy the product, and my conversion rate when I look up top is 0.03. It's okay. That's a good benchmark, depending on the category you're in. But do you understand the full spectrum? And do you understand that if you had 1 million people up top, a 0.03 benchmark may not be bad. But if you have 100 people coming up top, you've already lost the battle. So understanding that full spectrum with a love for analytics.
Great. No, thank you. Thank you. That was really good. That's all we've got time for. But I really appreciate, always good to talk to you, Sri. Super insightful.
Likewise, Karina.
And thank you. Thank you very much. And
thank you to you as well.
Yes. And thank you to everyone who's been watching this fireside chat. Please feel free to comment below. And for those that are interested in continuing the discussion, please make sure you sign up to our social channels or Elixir social channels, and also get in touch with elixir.com/contact.